I remember being at my daughter's wedding reception and looking at or reflecting about the ceremony. I thought it was just a wonderful event. The wedding was beautiful. Of course, my daughter was stunning, and her husband Josiah, such a handsome man. The vows were honest and they were sweet. It was just a beautiful day. What made that wedding reception so unique, though, is a month prior to the wedding. This would have been sometime in July. I was sitting that morning at our breakfast table in our home, and I was having my morning coffee, and in a moment my wife came in and she joined me, but I could tell by the expression on her face that something was absolutely troubling her. And so I began asking her, what's wrong? What seems to be the problem? And she said, I had an absolute terrible nightmare. And she began going through the dream that she had. She said, we were sitting there at the reception and everything was great. The mariachi band was sounding amazing. The place was decorated beautifully. The meal was exceptional, but it came time for the wedding cake. Everything was ready. Everyone was gathered around. Josiah and Haley were there at the table waiting in expectation, and yet the cake could not be found. She could not find the wedding cake. And she said that in her nightmare, by this time, she's dialing a number, trying to get a hold of the cake shop and all of that, only to realize that it had never been ordered. We were all at the wedding reception, and there was no wedding cake. This actually is something that occurred, well, or something similar to it. It is a dilemma that happened in John's Gospel in the 2nd chapter. We find that there is this tremendous wedding party that is happening in the city of Cana, and what we kind of gather from reading is that Mary must have been in charge of this wedding event. And Mary is now facing, in the Gospel of John, the 2nd chapter, she's facing something very similar to what my wife had a nightmare about. The wedding was moving along wonderful, the guests were celebrating, but the wine was gone. Back then, wine was to a wedding what cake is to a wedding today. Can you imagine being there at a wedding without a cake? They could not imagine a wedding without wine. To offer wine was to show respect to your guests, and not to offer wine at a wedding was an absolute insult. And so what Mary faced was a problem. They had ran out of wine. Similar to if my wife had forgotten to order the wedding cake, that was exactly what happened. That's the very uncomfortable feeling that was in the room. It was a problem. But let me specify, it was a problem in just everyday life. Everyday living, just a common, ordinary problem that came up. They ran out of wine. They ran out of wine. When you think about it, most of the problems we face are similar. Seldom do we have to deal with dilemmas of a national scale. Most of us, those of you watching this video, most of us are not those types or in those types of positions. We just have small everyday dilemmas or problems. We're late for a meeting. We leave something at the office. A coworker forgets a report. Mail gets lost. Traffic gets jammed. The waves that are kind of rocking our lives are not life-threatening, but they can be, right? A poor response to a simple problem can light a fuse, and what begins as a snowflake can snowball into an avalanche unless proper care is taken. And for that reason, you might want to see how Mary reacted. Her solution gives us a practical plan for kind of untangling the knots that life brings to us. She goes to Jesus and she simply says, they have no more wine. That's it. That's all she said. Very simple. She didn't go ballistic. She simply assessed the problem and she gave it to Jesus. She defined the problem. She could have exploded. Why didn't you plan better? There's not enough wine. Maybe she could have yelled at Joseph, this is your fault. You guys never do anything right. If anything has to be done right, I have to do it myself. She could have exploded like that. Or maybe she could have imploded. This is my fault. I failed. I'm to blame. I deserve it. I'm a failure in life. Tie me up and march me to the gallows. I deserve it. It's easy to focus on everything but the solution. Mary didn't do that. She simply looked at the knot that life had brought her. She looked at it, she understood it, and she took it to the right person. I've got one here. I can't untie, Jesus. And so John chapter 2 verse 3 tells us, when all the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. Please notice she took the problem to Jesus before she took it to anyone else. What causes us to think of prayer as the last option rather than the first? I can think of two reasons. Feeling of independence and feelings of insignificance. Let's be honest, sometimes we are independent. We begin to think that we are big enough to solve all of our problems, all of our own problems. You know, I can remember when my children were growing, my daughter is actually 4 years older than my son, and so in our house, everything turned into a competition. It was a big deal when they could both walk or when they could both run, chasing each other. It was a big deal when they both learned how to swim. Of course, my daughter learned how to swim before my son, and so when he learned, that was a big deal. It was a difficult time in our house when one had training wheels on their bike and the other didn't. But what I noticed with each achievement, and it didn't matter which child, whether my daughter or my son, every time they achieved something, they pointed out, look, Dad, I can do it on my own. And my wife, Shanna, and I, we applauded and we celebrated each and every accomplishment that they made, but there was a part of me that hoped they never arrived to a point where they were too grown up to call their daddy, too grown up to say, I don't need you anymore, too grown up to say, I don't need your help anymore. Did you know that God feels the same way about us? Prayer needs to be the very first thing that comes into your mind when you're facing a problem or a dilemma. If it's not our independence, we struggle, we feel insignificant. We could say, well, sure, Mary can take her problems to Jesus. She's his mother. He doesn't want to hear my problems. I don't want to trouble him with my messes. You know, one of my favorite Psalms is Psalms 18. The 19th verse says, he rescued, or we could say he saved me because he delighted in me. We miss that sometimes. We miss the fact that God delights in us. There are many reasons why God rescues us, why God shows up, why God saves, why God gives us salvation. But one of the sweetest reasons God rescues, why God saves us, is because he's fond of you. He likes having you around. If God had a refrigerator, your picture would be on it. If God had a wallet, your photo would be in it. If God has a cell phone, you would show up as a screensaver. He sends you flowers every spring, a sunrise every morning, and whenever you want to talk, he wants to listen. And the last thing you should worry about is being a nuisance to God. All you need to concentrate on is doing what he tells you to do. Note the sequence of events in the verse. It says that Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water. And so they filled the jars to the top. And then he said to them, now take some out and give it to the master of the feast. And so the Bible says they took the water to the master, and when he tasted the water, it became wine. Now, notice the sequence. Fill first the jars with water. Then Jesus instructed the servants to take the water, not the wine, take the water to the master. If I'm a servant, I don't want to do that. How is that going to solve the problem? What is the master going to say when he lifts up the cup and he finds water in it instead of wine? But these servants had enough understanding, enough trust to do what Jesus said. And so the problem was solved. Note, the water became wine after they obeyed, not before. What if the servants had refused? What if they had said, "No way"? What if you refuse? What if you identify the problem, take it to Jesus, and then refuse to do what he says? That's possible. After all, God is asking you to take some steps of faith. Money is tight, but he still asks you to give. You've been offended, but he asks you to forgive the offender. Someone else blew the assignment, but he asks you to be patient and work through it. You can't see God's face, but he still asks you to pray. You see, God is in your circumstance. Matthew 7:7, ask, it shall be given you. Seek, you shall find. Knock, it shall be opened unto you. The next time you face a common problem, follow the example of Mary at the wineless wedding. Identify the problem, present it to Jesus, do what he says, and watch God do the rest. I look forward to being with you next week as we go further into the Gospel of John and realize he is very much in our circumstances. I'm going to give this to your Connect group leader. There'll be a time of discussion, talking, sharing, enjoying, visiting. Please be involved. I hope that you have a great lesson tonight. And more than anything, remember, you are not by yourself. You are not alone. God is with you even in your life. He is there to help you in your problems and in your dilemmas. Trust him and obey him. God bless.